Almost everyone is familiar with the character of Tarzan, ape man and lord of the jungle. He's appeared in over 74 novels, sold more than 100 million copies, and is the first truly mass-market action hero. But who is Tarzan? How was he a reflection of his time? To understand this, first we have to explore the life of the creator himself, Edgar Rice Burroughs. Born in 1875, Burroughs struggled to make a living for 30 years before finally selling his writing when he was around 40. He was raised in a military-minded household, so he quickly joined the army despite his greater interest in the arts. His brief stint ended after he deserted just before the Spanish-American War began, and was further humiliated when he was turned down when he applied to be a part of Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders. A self-professed flop, Burroughs began writing after a series of odd jobs led him to a pulp stand. He read one issue and promptly realized that he could tell stories just as rotten as theirs, and more interesting as well. His first attempt, a sci-fi adventure romance about an outer space civilization called Barsoom, earned him $400. Burroughs reluctantly decided to make writing for the pulps his new career. Not long after, he created Tarzan, who was modeled after Rudyard Kipling's Mowgli and Roman legends of Romulus and Remus. Although he continually described his writing as trash and rotten, people ate it up. Burroughs had to write nearly 4,000 words a day just to keep up with the massive demand for more tales about the Lord of the Jungle and his companions. He even complained of recurring shoulder pain because of this hectic schedule. To a critic with a retrospective view, Burroughs' first Tarzan stories were nothing spectacular. With dialogue that was questionable at best, the reflecting scholar easily realizes that the true allure of Tarzan was in his environment, character, and ingenuity. But more on that later. Although he became moderately well off because of his empire of pulp fantasies, Burroughs struggled with his personal life. Divorced twice and no master of personal finances, Burroughs built an enormous ranch called Tarzana that served as his personal getaway, although it still wasn't free from the endless requests for him to churn out more stories. He says it best himself.
After the success of Tarzan, motion picture royalties began coming in regularly. With my career safely insured, we moved to California and founded Tarzana Ranch. It's far removed from the unnatural pressures of the big city. That is, except for the Hollywood producers who come around looking to buy the rights to my stories.
Despite his personal misgivings, Burroughs served as an inspiration for many future authors and filmmakers, including Ray Bradbury, who once stated, "We loved, we adored, we went quite mad with Mr. Burroughs." Also on the list, George Lucas, creator of Star Wars, a film franchise that revolutionized blockbuster cinema comparable to Tarzan's meteoric rise in fame. Burroughs also inspired Gene Roddenberry, creator of Star Trek, whose characters visit otherworldly planets just like those that Burroughs created decades earlier. Moving on to Tarzan's character and why he was so influential. One of the primary reasons for Tarzan's immense popularity was what he represented. Burroughs wrote the first Tarzan pulp in 1912, and Americans fell in love. He was a way to escape. By the turn of the 20th century, Frederick Jackson Turner had already pronounced the American frontier closed in his widely read thesis. Running to the west was no longer an option. The characterization of men as independent, self-reliant, and hardy was disappearing in most men's everyday lives, and pulps were the perfect way to escape the entrapment of cities and emasculation of working-class life. Tarzan's character is also used as a vehicle to approach the less-than-savory ideas of the time, including social Darwinism, colonialism, racism, and sexism. Social Darwinism, the idea that humans and their economic success is tied to natural selection, is present in Tarzan's stories. The social hierarchy is always the same, and Tarzan is always at the top. This is because he's actually a lord. His parents, Lord Greystoke and Lady Alice, were sent to Africa to investigate Arab traders when their ship was taken over by mutineers. They died, leaving Tarzan to fend for himself in the jungle, yet he still inherits some of the abilities of the upper class through his shared genetic code. He can read and speak English and French, he acts with morality, and he possesses distinctly European traits of chivalry and honor. In addition to this, colonialism and the ideas of the white man's burden plays a large role in the Tarzan pulps. Whenever Tarzan encounters a group of natives, he knows that he deserves to be above them, and that it is his place to teach them lessons when they misbehave, even if it means slaughtering them. This condescending paternalism and racism lasted into the film adaptations as well. Native Africans are portrayed as not civilized, unattractive, and even cannibalistic at times. Similarly, the sexism in the pulps and films is evident. Jane is completely dependent on Tarzan for her every need in the jungle. She is used as a vehicle to make male readers feel adequate by exploiting the protect the weak mentality. This is an interesting parallel to the character of Lady Alice, Tarzan's mother, who appeared in the 1918 silent movie adaptation and is significantly more independent than her successor. Tarzan's characterization extended so much to modern issues that he began to engage in conflict with villains who would seem extremely out of place in the jungles of Africa. He faced off against Chicago gangsters, Italian communists, Russian spies, and Nazis, winning every time. The next step for emerging film studios was clear: a movie adaptation. In 1918, a silent film was released that was not up to the standards of the creator, despite being a very faithful adaptation to the original novel. Burroughs argued that its star, Elmo Lincoln, was too portly for the role, and that Tarzan should be built more like a panther than an elephant. Burroughs asked for his name to be removed from the credits. The studio continued to make serials, but never achieved enormous success. In 1932, a new film starring Johnny Weissmuller, an Olympic swimmer, and Maureen O'Sullivan was released. It was not as true to the pulps as its predecessor, but was a hit nonetheless. It also gave us the charismatic, instantly recognizable Tarzan yell. Like the original pulps and 1918 film, the 1932 film downplayed Tarzan's English background and lordship in favor of highlighting his savagery compared to Jane's propriety. Unfortunately, most of the similarities between the pulps and both films concern the disappointing ideals of the time. Natives are horribly depicted in all aspects of the property, and Jane always manages to turn into a screaming mess, desperate for male guidance. But the movie was a huge hit, so Weissmuller and O'Sullivan starred in several more, including Tarzan and His Mate and Tarzan Finds His Son. Weissmuller would go on to play Tarzan for another decade. In addition, other adaptations, also under the supervision of Burroughs, were made, starring the likes of Buster Crabbe in the title role. Going back to the negative aspects of the Tarzan stories, it is unclear whether Burroughs himself believed in many of the underlying philosophies of his writings. Before beginning his science fiction and fantasy sagas, Burroughs actually penned a poem called The Black Man's Burden, condemning white culture for its abuse of the African race. These views don't appear in Tarzan comics, but it is possible that he may have been pandering to his audience instead of spouting philosophy he personally believed in. Burroughs' marketing of the Tarzan property has allowed it to stay relevant into today. After the release of the film, audience members had the chance to buy bread, ice cream, chewing gum, and bathing suits, all Tarzan themed. A Tarzan radio show was created. Children took the Ape Man pledge to be truthful, honest, and courageous. The relatable qualities of the main character and resilience of the strange man who created him has manifested in a cultural icon whom Americans won't soon forget.